The problem is a lot of people get their dreams stolen. And he introduced me and he said, I want to tell a story before I put Jack on. He said the story goes like this. When I was a high school student, there was a kid in my class who was an itinerant that moved around in the back of a truck. His dad was a trainer, and he never lived anywhere more than a couple of months. He would never go to school anywhere more than a couple of months. And he had this dream, though. He wanted to grow up and raise thoroughbred racing horses. And the teacher at this school, when he was there, asked the kids to write a paper. They said, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he got very excited because this was a chance to really go for his dream. So he wrote down, I want to raise thoroughbred racing horses, and he drew a diagram of a 200-acre ranch, and he drew a diagram of a 4,000-square-foot house where all the rooms would be, and on the ranch he had the racetrack, and where the tack room would be, and the bunkhouses, and the central administration office, and all this stuff. And he was very excited, and he handed it in. And he got it back a week later and said, F, see me after class. Well, he was shocked. He'd poured his heart into this. And he went up to the teacher. He said, how come I got an F? What's the deal? And he said, I'll tell you why you got an F. You're a poor kid living off the back of a truck. Do you know what land costs in this valley? Do you know what it costs for breeding stock and for stud fees? This is an unrealistic dream for a young man like you. There's no way you could ever achieve this. And it's my job as a teacher to make sure you don't grow up and be disappointed. So I want you to write a more realistic dream for yourself, and I'll give you a higher grade. Well, he went home and he talked to his dad, and he said, Dad, what should I do? And his dad said, well, I can't tell you what to do. It's your life. But I will tell you this. Whatever you decide is probably going to affect the rest of your life, so think hard about it. Well, he thought and he thought and he thought, and after a week he went back to the teacher and he handed in the exact same paper. And he said, you can keep the F. I'm keeping my dream. Now, just like you, I got goosebumps when he told that story. And then Monty goes over to the mantel and he pulls down a frame, and in that frame is a piece of paper, and it says in red letters, F, see me after class. And the name on the paper was Monty F. Roberts. We were in his 4,000-square-foot house and his 204-acre ranch, and that year his income was over $6 million. Now the reality is, here's a poor kid who made his dream come true. How did he do it? See, and people will be out there that want to steal your dreams, that want to discourage you, and the reason they want to do that is they don't want you to win. Because if you win and they lose, it makes them look like a loser. So they want you to kind of stay at the level of mediocrity they are. And what makes it even harder is most of our parents weren't huge dream makers. Most of us grew up in what we call middle class. Most of our parents didn't make their dreams come true. And they didn't have the skills to teach you. And so we're going to be learning here those techniques that can make your dreams come true. Now I have a client, a corporate client called 9X, New York, I don't know what it stands for, New England Telephone 9X, whatever it is, New York something exchange. And I go up there and I do consulting with them. And I was in this office, on a bulletin board, someone had a very interesting poster. It said, this life is a test. It is only a test. If it had been an actual life, you would have received further instructions on where to go and what to do. Now, how many of you have read the book, Chicken Soup for the Soul? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, most of you, that's good. Now, that book, when we first took that to New York, was turned down by 33 major New York publishers. They all said no, 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 no. Major rejection. And, you know, we thought it was a good book, but they said no violence, there's no sex, people don't buy short stories, you know, where's the hook? We said, no, these are stories that will inspire and motivate people, and we know they work because we've been doing these talks all over the country and we get standing ovations. And they said, no, I'm sorry. So then we went to the American Booksellers Association convention. There are 4,000 booths. And we had little backpacks on with manuscripts in it. We went around going, will you publish our book? 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 And everyone said, no, not interested, not interested, not interested. We talked to over 144 publishers in depth. And finally, Health Communications down in Deerfield, Florida, they said, look, give us the manuscript. We'll take it home. We'll read it on the plane. And they called us up a week later and said, we love it. We want to publish it. Now, what if we'd given up after the 100th person and said, well, obviously this isn't supposed to happen? We would have self-published the book if no one else had, because we were committed to the vision. Now, our publisher was very excited about the book as we were, and we said, we have a goal. We want to sell 150,000 copies by Christmas. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard a grown man fall off a chair and laugh over a phone. It's not the most pleasant sight you've ever heard. You know, it's not a great sound. And he said, no, we'll be lucky to sell 20,000. We said, no, you don't understand. We have his dream. We have his vision. And he said, well, sorry. You know, it's nice, but we don't think it'll happen. Well, we didn't reach our goal. We only sold 135,000. But we were pretty excited about that. And then we said our next goal is to do $1.5 million in a year and a half. And they said, well, that's really absurd. We said, no, we're going to do that. Now, we didn't meet that goal either. We did $1.3 million. But see, the point is, without having a dream, and we're going to see as we go through this course, that having a dream and using the principle I'm going to teach you can take you from anywhere to wherever you want to go. But you got to use the principles. Number one, says you must focus more time and energy on the achievement of your dreams. See, most of us are floating through life being pulled in every which direction, and we're not really consciously thinking about where do I want to be by when and what do I want to get done. But if we put more attention on that, there's an old phrase that says energy flows where your attention goes. And so we want to make sure that our energy is going to follow our intention, but if we don't think about it, nothing's going to happen. Now, my mentor in this whole arena was a man named W. Clement Stone. Some of you may have heard of him. He was a self-made multimillionaire. He was the publisher of Success magazine for a number of years. Og Mandino was his editor. This guy was a fabulous guy. One of the most dynamic gentlemen I've ever met. And he was I think he was worth $600 million when I worked for him. And I think he was worth $800 million when I quit 2 years later. So you can get a sense of how his wealth was moving. And when I got a job there working for him, he said, I want to do a little intake interview with you. And I said, fine, gosh, this guy's going to talk to me. That was pretty cool. And he said, first I have a question. I said, what's that? He said, do you watch television? I said, yeah, sure. He said, well, how many hours a day do you watch? I said, well, I watch, I don't know, Good Morning America, and then I watch the news, and maybe Johnny Carson, and about 3 hours a day. He said, well, I want you to cut out 1 hour a day. I said, okay, I'll trust you, but why? He said, because if you take that 1 hour a day and you multiply that by 365 hours, at the end of the year, or 365 days, at the end of the year, you've got 365 hours. Divide that by a 40-hour work week, you get 9.5 additional weeks of productive time. And he says, now I want that time. I said, well, what do you want me to do with it? He said, I want you to read. I want you to read in the field. I want you to read about motivation. I want you to read about stories. I want you to read about psychology. I want you to read about management. I want you to read about computer sciences. I want you to read about the media. I want you to read about this arena we're playing the game in. And he said, if you do that, you're going to become much more valuable to not only me, but to yourself. And then later I heard Jim Rohn say, if you'd read a book a week, in a year you've read 52 books, in 10 years you've read 520 books, again, in this field. We're not talking about novels here. That would make you probably in the top 1% of your profession. Because what age are we in? The information age. And most of us are sitting in a numbed out state, watching some show, we laugh and all that, but what have you really got at the end of it? And I think it's great to relax a little bit and let TV do that and watch a sports game and all that, but the problem is we get into a trance and we let our life go by. Now, maybe you don't want to read. Maybe you want to exercise, get fit. Maybe you want to spend quality time with your children. Maybe you want to meditate and pray and read the Bible. But do something that's more uplifting than what most of us are doing. The average American watches 6 hours of TV a day. Now, think about that. That's 1/4 of a day. That says by the time you're 60, you'll have spent 15 years watching television. And we're on television, so I'm not trying to make TV wrong, okay? But use it intelligently. You know, certain drugs are useful for you in terms of healing diseases, but if you overuse them, become addicted to them, then it's not to your advantage. Now, the other thing he taught me, he said, do you watch TV right before you go to bed? And I said, well, yeah. He said, that's the worst time. He said, because what are you usually watching around 11 o'clock? The news. Is that uplifting? Yeah. Not usually. Negative stuff. Rape, murder, pillage, the economy is going down, you know, all that kind of stuff. And the problem is you're putting that in your brain right before you go to bed. What he taught me, and we've validated now since we've done some psychological research on this, the last 45 minutes before you go to bed, whatever you input into your brain, through television, reading, conversation, whatever, is going to be played more times in your unconscious over the course of the night. That's why kids can cram for a test at midnight and then do well the next day. It's only short-term memory, but it will go in there. So if you're watching the news, or you're having a fight, or you're watching Friday the 13th, Part 7, you know, or whatever, that's what you're processing all night long. This is not good. What if instead you were reading a biography of a famous person, someone that had done good in the world, like Martin Luther King or John Kennedy or whoever that might be for you? Then that's what you're playing all night long. Images of success in there. What if I take my day and plan it for the next day, so all night long my unconscious is figuring out how to make that plan come true? What if I read spiritual literature so I get into a very calm, centered place before I go to sleep? What if I sit down with my wife and we tell each other what we appreciate about each other before we go to sleep, instead of having a fight or not talking at all? So there's a lot of things that you want to do at that point in time. The least thing you want to do is watch something or take something in that's negative. Now, the second thing that Stone taught me was to avoid toxic people. Do you all know what toxic people are? And surround yourself with positive people. I have a friend who just wrote a book that's going to be very famous called If Life is a Game, These Are the Rules. Her name's Cherie Carter Scott. And she wrote a book before that called Negaholics. People that are addicted to negativity, like an alcoholic. And then there's, I sometimes call them black holes of the universe. You know, you meet people, and after 10 minutes, you're like, oh, God, you know, you're walking like this, because they bring you down, you know. Then there are other people that bring you up. And you want to surround yourself with people that energize you, that believe in your dreams, that support you, that encourage you. What Robert Schuller calls possibility thinkers. Is this making sense? Yeah. Stone also taught me, he said, if there's something you want to do, go hang out with someone who's already done it. Because you're going to learn from them. Let's flip back a second and just look at this whole idea of surrounding yourself with positive people. One of the stories that we put in the first Chicken Soup for the Soul book was about this guy driving to work. And it was a Paul Harvey story. You all know Paul Harvey from the radio. And he said Gary Coleman was driving to work when this woman and he collided at an intersection. Not a major accident, but a fender bender. And they get out, and he's relieved that it's kind of minor, and she starts to cry. He's going, why are you crying, lady? It's not that big a deal. She said, you don't understand. This is a new car. My husband just bought this. It's only 3 days out of the showroom. How am I going to explain this to him? And he says, well, look, I'm sorry. I understand. This is not good, but, you know, I need to get to work. Can you get your driver's license and your registration and your insurance documents? So she says, okay. So they go over and they pull out the documents, and she opens up her envelope. And on top of all the documents, there's a little note in her husband's handwriting. It says, in case of accident, remember, honey, it's you I love, not the car.